watching Roll Tide Daily, the new daily program for Crimson Tide fans, presented by SEC Country. Now, here's your host, former Alabama All-American, Mike Johnson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back into Roll Tide Daily. My name is Mike Johnson. It's good to have you guys back hollering at us in the Facebook comment section, the YouTube comment section. As always, we love to have the conversation going on here on Roll Tide Daily, brought to you by SEC Country, Alabama. Like I said, my name is Mike Johnson. I'm going to be bringing you Alabama football, important information, I guess, for the next 30 minutes, and hope you guys will be able to chime in and join us. As always, if you guys enjoy the show, if you want to invite your friends over, invite your family over on Facebook, Twitter, the YouTube comment section, please be sure to share the show. Please be sure to like the show, and please be sure to follow us at SEC Country Alabama on the Facebook page and on the YouTube page and everything else going on. Already got a couple guys weighing in. Clifford Searcy over there on the Facebook page, Roll Tide. Tyrone Solling Jr. giving it a thumbs up. My guy Shannon Burgess, our local LSU fan over in the YouTube comment section, giving the what up Mike and the peace fingers. Thanks for everybody that's joining the show so far. Love to have the conversation going. Before we get started today, I want to bring you guys another question of the day. Yesterday, if you guys remember, we talked about what future opponents a lot of you guys would like to see. We're going to get into my list a little bit later. Yesterday, we brought you Christopher Walsh's future opponents list. He had guys like Rice, Navy, Army on there. I didn't agree with most of them, so I kind of made my own list. We're going to break it up into a couple of parts and bring it to you later. For right now, today's question of the day, who is the best player on Alabama's current roster? Who is the most talented football player on Alabama's current roster right now? I'm going to tell you who it is in just a little bit. I don't think it's who most of you guys think it's going to be. We have a bunch of great topics. We're going to get into the preseason All-SEC defense. We got in the offense yesterday. Going to talk about, like I said, the opponent wish list. We're going to talk about an article in The Athletic talking about Stuart Mandel wrote about Saban's process of hiring. But first, let's get rolling with topic number one, and of course, that is the All-SEC defensive rankings that came out today from AL.com. Our friends over there have the 14 SIDs, the sports information directors that are voting on this from all the SEC teams. Let me remind you first, though, because I want to go back to one of the players that was on yesterday's things. Let's remind you of what the first team All-SEC offense, the preseason rankings for the All-SEC offense from AL.com looked like. I think we got that, guys, to show you right now. Now, I was upset yesterday. If you guys remember on the show, I was upset that Drew Lock from Missouri is our first string All-SEC preseason quarterback. I don't know if he's going to, have the best year up there with, some of the things that are going to be going on up at Missouri. I think Barry Odom's on the hot seat. I think their offense is lacking in a couple of different areas. Plus, he's making the trip, obviously, to Tuscaloosa, so we'll get to see him up close. I made the argument yesterday that Tua Tagovailoa, Jalen Hurts at least deserve to be mentioned in that conversation. I mean, Tua Tagovailoa on CBS Sports ranked the number 2 quarterback in the country as it sits right now. We also had Damian Harris that was projected as the number 1 running back. Take it or leave it. Benny Snell sitting back there in the running back slot as well. It is what it is. I think a lot of these other guys on this list kind of deserve to be sitting there. Ross Piercebaker, obviously moving from left guard at Alabama over to center, gets the center nod ahead of some pretty good centers from around the country. McCoy at both Florida and Texas A&M, both those guys pretty good centers. The guy I want to highlight for you guys right now, though, is the left tackle for Alabama, Jonah Williams. If you guys remember, he came in and played as a true freshman a couple of years ago over there at the right tackle spot while Cam Robinson played at left tackle. He then moved over to the left tackle spot last year to really highlight what that offensive line was doing. It was a seamless transition. He made a lot of good players along the defensive lines in the SEC look not very good. And so when we look back at Jonah Williams, I don't think a lot of people are giving him the praise that he deserves. If I ask you that question right off the top, who is one of these guys that, should be Bama's best player? Who's their best player on the football team? A lot of you guys are not going to answer Jonah Williams. And the fact of the matter is, he probably is Alabama's best player on the roster right now. We have a quote to give you guys from an NFL scout from our friends over at Bleacher Report. They were talking about the top 10 talents in next year's NFL draft. Remember, Jonah Williams is only 2 years removed from high school. The questions around Jonah Williams and his ability moving on to the next level were highlighted by Bleacher Report, along with the top 10 players from around the country in terms of the NFL draft, coming up this next season. They had Jonah Williams listed as the number 4 player in next year's draft, moving into things talking about Mel Kiper's big board and some of the things people are expecting of Jonah Williams. He's going to play left tackle. Now, will that be the blind side tackle at Alabama next year? I'm not really sure. Jazz Hatcher weighing in, kind of asking, talking about, who's the most talented player. Najee Harris, hands down. I think that's an interesting kind of take. Brett Tierce Jr. weighing in with a Roll Tide. Justin DelMarco saying, got to give the O-line love. Absolutely agree with giving the O-line love. And I got the quote sitting here for you guys in just a second. We're going to be able to bring that up. But until then, Let me make sure I can get that pulled up for you guys right now. Here's the scouts quote. He's everything we want in a tackle. He's smart, he's athletic, he's tough, he's experienced. I don't know what the question marks are. Talking about Jonah Williams, Alabama's left tackle. The Bleacher Report article goes on to say there might not be question marks when it comes to Jonah Williams. He started at right tackle from the get-go in Tuscaloosa, and in doing so, looks like a better NFL prospect than his teammate and left tackle Cam Robinson, despite being a true freshman. After moving to the left side in his sophomore season, Williams continued to display the tools to be the number 1 overall pick. That's kind of what I'm trying to echo to everybody out there in Bama land. Make sure you're giving Jonah Williams all the praise he deserves. I know everybody's going to talk about what Jedrick Wills is and Matt Womack on the right side, Alex Leatherwood possibly getting a shot. A lot of people love Ross Pierschbacher. He started for 3 straight years. All that praise is well deserved. But when I ask you the question, who's the best player on Alabama's roster right now, the answer, according to a lot of people from around the country, is Jonah Williams. This is the number 4 overall prospect in next year's NFL draft, according to a lot of people that are close to the program. Now, I do want to highlight this year's All-SEC defensive preseason rankings that came out from AL.com yesterday. I think we have a list of that to show you guys right here. I think there was some interesting names on there. I'm not really upset about some of the guys that were left off the list. Raekwon Davis was the only Alabama name, though, to make this list, from that Alabama football team, a defense that, as you guys know, is always a great defense, under Nick Saban. Now, I'm not really mad about any guys in the secondary not being there. You guys know that Alabama is replacing a ton of guys in terms of the secondary, the cornerbacks, the safety. When you talk about some guys at linebacker level, some guys have been nicked up. Raekwon Davis is highly deserving of what, those guys want to do for him. They had Davis listed at 6'7", 303. I think he's a scary prospect. He's a junior. He had 69 tackles last year, 10 for loss. That's 8.5 sacks, and was named first team All-SEC after the season concluded last year. So, of course, Raekwon Davis is going to be getting that praise. There is one guy I want to highlight. Now, I think you can make the argument for a number of guys. Listen, Anthony Jennings is a guy that I think is going to show up on a lot of radars this season. Christian Miller, where can we get the love for this guy? He's going to have a good year this year coming back from some of these injuries. Some of these guys aren't talked about. The guy that I'm going out on a limb, and it's not even really a long limb telling you guys how good he is Mack Wilson. Mack Wilson will be on these lists at the end of the year. Now, Mack Wilson didn't play as much as you wanted him to last year. He had 40 tackles. I think he had 4 interceptions, actually, a couple of sacks on last year's, radar. Now, they're going to list, Devin White's part of that. Tyrell Dodson from A&M is a first-team linebacker. Josh Allen from Kentucky's a first-team linebacker. But I'm just here to tell you, it's not taking any praise away from those linebackers around the SEC. But if we get to the end of the year and Mack Wilson is not on that list, everybody that voted on that list deserves a slap in the face for not having Mack Wilson on that list. I guarantee you this is a 100-tackle type of guy, having Dylan Moses next to him, having those guys rushing the edge. Mack Wilson is going to be one of those guys that really sends things to the next level. James Perkin weighing in saying, don't sleep on Lewis. I completely agree with that. Terrell Lewis is going to be a man amongst boys. Justin Del Marco weighing in saying, no Mack Wilson. An injury is probably the only thing that kept him off an All-SEC list last year. Absolutely tend to agree with that. Victoria Lynn Burdnick weighing in. Return of the Mac is just awesome. I completely agree with that. Jazz Hatcher saying, where is Mack Wilson? A lot of you guys, Brian Canterbury, where is Mack Wilson? Victoria Lynn Burdnick saying, make sure you show love to Ruggs. Listen, to me, the thing is that when we talk about Isaiah Buggs, the defensive lineman, I think he's kind of the next man up. I think Keenan Williams is going to be one of those names that we've mentioned for quite a long time. But to me, the glaring omission here in terms of preseason rankings is Mack Wilson. You can look over the offensive side of the ball. They're projections, right? These SIDs are projecting what they think some guys will be. Because if you look at Drew Lock last year, I think there's a lot of questions to be asked. If we're projecting Mack Wilson, though, and we're projecting that linebacker position at the University of Alabama, you have to look no further than to name him on this All-SEC defense. It's not happening in preseason. We might see it on some of these preseason lists. Remember, this is just one list voted on the sports information directors at each of these schools. But if we're talking about Mack Wilson and you're looking for the postseason list, I can almost guarantee you that he is going to be showing up when we're talking about that. Christopher McLeod over in the YouTube comment section, Mack Wilson, the best linebacker in the country. Maybe not yet. I don't know if I'm ready to jump on that step yet. I think that Devin White is one of those guys down at LSU that really deserves a ton of praise. But at the end of the year, I'm going to tell you right now, Mack Wilson, with the speed he has, the coverage ability, really a new age Reuben Foster style of linebacker that loves to hit big, he's going to be on everybody's radar by the time this season concludes. Colin Visna also weighing in. A healthy Dylan Moses will impress skeptics as well. Chip Edwards kind of says the same thing. Dylan Moses could be on that list as well. I agree with you. I think that combination at linebacker for a couple of years to come really, becomes very, very scary for some of the opponents that Bama is going to see down the road. Appreciate you guys chiming in on that. I invite you to kind of keep chiming in as far as who you think is the best player on Alabama's roster. I think that's kind of an interesting question of the day. Not a lot of people are going to say Jonah Williams, like I just told you guys, though. A lot of people think top 10 draft pick for Alabama's left tackle Jonah Williams next year. I'm sorry. Now, I do want to move on to topic number 2. And before we get to my opponent wish list, I'm going to show you the top 5 of my opponent wish list for next year. Let's remind you guys, though, the wish list we talked about yesterday from our boy Christopher Walsh at SEC Country. He comes out with his top 10 wish list as far as teams he'd like to see Bama add to the schedule. Nebraska, Purdue, Army, Hawaii, Iowa, Boston College, Navy, Wisconsin, Oregon, Rice. Now, these are all for different reasons. I mean, obviously, you'd like to see Nebraska. You think that's kind of a blue blood style. Purdue, I think that Nick Saban has a losing record against Purdue. Same thing goes for seeing them play in Army and Navy. Boston College could be a fun home and home. Wisconsin, kind of one of those games that, very similar programs in the way they run their style. Oregon, kind of an alternate way of doing things. I think Christopher Walsh had some interesting observations. I really do. I think he had a lot of good points looking at some of these football teams, looking at what Bama is, what some of these other football teams are, looking at historically, looking at, home and home series and how fun it is to travel to some of these kind of away games. But I got to tell you, my list didn't look like Christopher Walsh. I want to tease this a little bit too, because I want you guys to really look at some of these games I'm putting on this list. Let's start with the top 5 of my list I was able to put on. This is Mike Johnson. This is me putting together my top 5 list of teams I'd like to see Bama add to the schedule in the coming year. And here it starts right here. Now, listen, I didn't go as far in to say, man, what's the travel schedule like? What are the state laws in California? Can we get Stanford to Tuscaloosa? I didn't go that far in. But if you don't want to see these teams on my list, I don't think you're an actual Alabama fan. Let's just be honest about it. We got number 1, Michigan. Do you not want to see Nick Saban versus Jim Harbaugh? I can slap you in the face if you don't want to see that. Bama going up to the big house up in Michigan, possibly in August, to get out of some of the sweltering heat. Michigan returning back down to Bama to get a little bit of that SEC style of football play. That is my number 1 game that we were talking about yesterday. Chip Edwards weighing in, really would like to Bama to play Michigan. Jim versus Saban, 2 different personalities. Absolutely agree with everything you're saying there. I will go on to say that my next opponent wish list is very much for the same reasons. Oklahoma football. When we're talking about the Sooners, we're talking about an Oklahoma football team and Bob Stoops. Now, I know Bob Stoops isn't there anymore, but Lincoln Riley goes along that same kind of pathway. Bob Stoops talked down to the SEC throughout his entire career. Talk about how the SEC was too built up. Well, guess what, Bob Stoops? Last time you played Alabama, you got a consolation game. I'd like to see the home and home from the Alabama series really be able to take off for these 2 programs. I think that having a meaningful game on the schedule, when you get to go to Norman, Oklahoma, and you get to show the Oklahoma Sooners in their own house what Alabama football is all about, really kind of highlights to me a lot of the same things that I was talking about as far as Michigan. It's a clashing of personalities. It's really 2 football coaches and 2 programs that talk down to the SEC. I'd like to see both those teams square off with Bama in a meaningful game. Tyrone Stallings Jr. saying, yes, Saban and Harbaugh. Completely agree with that. Tim Glover, Michigan. Oh, yeah, I'd like that. Merritt Kelly, I like that. Jazz Hatcher weighing in saying, I want Ohio State bad. Let's continue to go down the list. Let's talk about Ohio State and how fun that game would be. I played in a couple of Nick Saban versus Urban Meyer games, and I can tell you right now, they were always fun. And that game in 2009, like a lot of people know, sent Urban Meyer to a little bit of an early Florida retirement. He didn't want to play those Nick Saban-style teams anymore. I think that obviously Ohio State got the best of Bama back in that Sugar Bowl back in 2014. But I think a home-and-home rematch where you get to go up to the Horseshoe up in Columbus, Ohio, get to invite Ohio State back down to Tuscaloosa, I think that would mean a lot in terms of these 2 programs and what direction they're going. I think that would be a lot of fun. I think a home-and-home with that one would be such a good thing moving forward. As far as these things go. Bernie Rumbly weighing in the YouTube comment section. 4 power teams. You get it, MJ. Brian Hall saying Michigan is the first I thought of. And Bernie Rumbly saying there's no power teams on that list. That's talking about Christopher Walsh's. And obviously, I go on to name a couple of more. Let's go back to my list because I'm not done telling you guys how I feel about these schedules. Miami, the Mark Richt team, the rematch of the 92 Sugar Bowl. You can say whatever you want to about the U down there right now, but Mark Richt has them on the right path. Now, do I think Mark Richt's football teams at Miami are really going to challenge Alabama under Nick Saban? I don't think so. I don't think this is a tough game for Alabama per se, but I think getting the home and home, being able to go to South Beach, being able to play down in Miami, and then welcome a blue blood program like Miami who has a national championship history up to Tuscaloosa says a lot about where those 2 programs are going. The next school that I'm naming on this list, a lot of the same reasons. Now, I got to admit, I threw this one in there. It's just not a Power 5 team. But FAU is just too good to pass up in terms of having a team that you would really want to do at home and home with. This is a Boca Raton, Florida game. I think it would be awesome to take Bama fans down there, really get some leisure activities. But let's be honest here. This is about Nick Saban. This is about Lane Kiffin. This is about the presser that you'd be able to get. Can we get a joint press conference here? Can we get Lane Kiffin and Nick Saban in the press in the same room before this game to kind of set off that presser? I think it would be awesome to see. Really, I mean, a lot of people at Alabama don't like Lane Kiffin for a lot of different reasons, but can you imagine Lane Kiffin's Twitter account leading up to this Florida-Atlanta game? The thing would be on absolute fire. And imagine, too, if Lane Kiffin's offense is able to put up 2 or 3 touchdowns against Bama's defense. I don't think it would happen, but imagine the storylines kind of coming out of that game, man. That would be a ton of fun. Again, that's the first 5 of my list. We're going to get to the next 5 for my list a little bit later in the show. Wanted to kind of break it up to give you guys a little bit of time to digest this. Tyrone Stallings Jr. weighing in, too physical for Miami. I have to agree with that. Justin DelMarco weighing in says, have the game scheduled for the kickoff, but would love to see a home and home. I absolutely agree with that. I think that anytime you look at these games and you really break down who you want to see Alabama play, home and home is the only way to go from here on out. That's why Bama schedules Notre Dame. That's why Bama schedules Texas here in the coming years. Before we get to those next 5, though, I want to reset the show. Again, my name is Mike Johnson. I'm your host for Roll Tide Daily here every 30 minutes. Monday through Thursday, we're going to do this show 4 days a week for right now, and also, make sure you're sharing this show. Make sure you're commenting in the comment section. Brian Hall weighing in the YouTube comment section. Good list, Mike. I think you're going to like the second half of my list too. I'm really passionate about who Bama's going to be playing in the coming years. For right now, though, let's get to the next topic. And if you guys are subscribers to The Athletic, and if you've ever followed Stuart Mandel, he used to write for Sports Illustrated. He's over at The Athletic right now. We highlighted a Bruce Feldman story early in the week talking about, Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Hurts, down at the Elite 11 camp, some insight on that. Stuart Mandel wrote an article yesterday that was eye-opening for me. Now, I know a lot of things about the Alabama program. I know a lot of things about what the football players go through. I have insight. I'm friends with Scott Cochran. I've talked to Kirby Smart. I've talked to Jeremy Pruitt. I have a lot of insight in the way things go in Alabama's program. One of the insights I don't have is Nick Saban's hiring process. And I think it's so interesting to look. And Stuart Mandel had a sit-down with Nick Saban in his office, talk about the hiring process, talk about the staff sizes that Alabama, talk about really why Nick Saban does the thing he does with his staff, what it's like to go through an interview with Nick Saban, how tough it really is. Now, Nick Saban started off this interview by touching on staff sizes and touching on really the fact that he doesn't really think it gives them a leg up against opponents. Here's the quote from Saban on theathletic.com. Everybody talks about our staff size like it gives us some advantage. My reasoning for developing a lot of young coaches is they grow up and develop in the system here. Most of the time they go someplace else and get experience. And then at some point in the future, you'll have a chance to hire them back. Now, we've seen Nick Saban do that. He's brought Jeremy Pruitt back into the fold. He's brought Lance Thompson back into the fold. He's brought back a ton of coaches. Do I think at some point he could bring back Dan Werner from South Carolina? Absolutely. Do I think Chris Weinke is a guy he would look at as a possible offensive coordinator? Absolutely. I think it's very interesting to kind of look at the insight from Nick Saban on some of these staff sizes and why he really goes out on a limb to hire a ton of these coaches and bring them into the fold. Now, Stuart Mandel, if you read the article, goes on to interview a couple of former Bama assistant coaches that are head coaches right now. First one being Mario Cristobal. And Mario Cristobal wanted to talk about what those interviews are like, what it's like interviewing with Nick Saban. It's not just Nick Saban. It's a lot of the staff. It's a lot of guys one-on-one. It's a group decision. Here's what Cristobal had to say about this hiring process. How hard is it to gauge how a person really is in a few hours? Some people are really good at interviewing. Some aren't. So what Saban does is make sure he gets them in a social setting or a one-on-one setting and meet with people who maybe think they don't have to impress him. I mean, read that again one more time. And meet with people who maybe think they don't have to impress. Anybody who's been around the program, anybody who's watched Nick Saban, anybody who knows kind of his assistants or what's around him, Mario Cristobal goes on to say, hey, listen, Nick Saban will ask Cedric Burns, his assistant, what'd you think of this guy? What did he act like around you? If you picked him up from the airport, what was this guy like? Mario Cristobal also says he had to sit down with Miss Terry. He had to sit down with Miss Terry and really sit through a dinner in terms of, some of those guys really being weeded out. Nick Saban wanted to make sure this was a group decision. I think it's kind of incredible to get a lot of the insight in terms of, Nick Saban's hiring process. Billy Napier, a head coach at Louisiana right now. He's another guy who's been in this Nick Saban system a couple of different times. If you remember, Nick Saban brought Billy Napier over after he was let go as Clemson's offensive coordinator in 2011. Before that offensive surge over at Clemson, Billy Napier was welcomed into the program. Billy Napier weighed in on theathletic.com. Here's what he had to say. It's one of the things that Saban figured out before others. It prevents attrition from hurting his program. He knows he's going to have turnover, and the more smart and intelligent people he can roll through there over the years, the larger pool of guys who understand the way he does things. Now, that's Billy Napier. Obviously, a ton of this coaching tree is growing a lot larger. When you look at Billy Napier, obviously him being a head coach, one of those guys who doesn't need a job back. But when you do look at some of the people who have flown out from under Nick Saban's wings in recent years, I think you can name a ton of guys that you think would be at the top of that list in terms of the people that Nick Saban really is willing to bring back in the coming years if they do have turnover. If Michael Locksley does leave for a head coaching job, or Tosh Lapoy does leave for a head coaching job, the list of people out there is really, really growing and continues to grow for people that know Nick Saban's systems, know the inside and outside of the Alabama program. Really, really interesting stuff from Stuart Mandel. Hope you guys get a chance to jump over there to theathletic.com, be able to read some of that, get the inside on the program. It was a long feature article, a lot of good insight in terms of Nick Saban and what he has been able to do. Matt Merle kind of a comment in the Facebook comment section. Can you start over? Just got caught up at work. Can't start over, but you can catch the show later on the Facebook page, and I hope you will do that. And please share that with your friends. We're going to continue to knock on to the next topic. You saw my passion a minute ago about the opponent list, the first five, kind of the first five I highlighted. We went through Michigan, went through Ohio State, went through Oklahoma, went through Miami, went through FAU. Now I want to highlight the back end of this list for you guys, because I think you're going to enjoy this one just as much as you did some of the stuff off the top. Brian Canterbury weighing in says, you have no idea what it means to me during the day to see this every day. Thanks so very much, Mike, and Roll Tide. Roll Tide to all you guys out in the comment section, and I hope you enjoy this next part of it. Now, this next part to me, probably not as juicy as the top 10, but I think this says a lot about the Alabama program in terms of where you want it to go. Now, I did steal this one from Christopher Walsh's list. I want to talk about this first one. If we can get this put up, Wisconsin is at number 6 on my list. Now, I don't know if you guys realize this or not, but if you ever hear anything about Camp Randall up in Wisconsin and how those home games are and how that town turns into an absolute fun show, I've heard so many good things. I've known people that have gone to Wisconsin, not to mention the fact that these two programs really are mirror images of it. Now, I know they squared off in Dallas a couple years ago. I know Bama won that game pretty handily. I know Wisconsin has played teams like LSU and other teams from the SEC. But having a home-and-home series where Bama can go up to Camp Randall in Wisconsin and then welcome another program like Wisconsin, who really plays the game in a similar way that Alabama does, back down into Tuscaloosa, I think would be an excellent thing. Now, I gotta say this next one, Washington State. This is one that absolutely pulls at my heartstrings just from the sports media side of me coming out, being able to do the show. Can you imagine the talking points that would come from a Mike Leach and Nick Saban, joint press conference, a home-and-home series? Now, I don't know anything. Is it Pullman, Washington? You guys know where Washington State is? Pullman, Washington is where Washington State is. If I had to guess, you fly into Seattle and you probably drive 5 hours in a car. If I had to guess, I don't know anything about the geography of the state of Washington, but I would have to guess that that's how you get to Pullman, Washington. Probably wouldn't be a game that a lot of Alabama fans made it to, but nonetheless, beautiful scenery, and you can't pass up a Mike Leach versus Nick Saban style presser and really game planning as far as that game goes. I think that would be a lot of fun to watch. Christopher Mooney weighing in about the Wisconsin on the list. Camp Randall is an awesome place to play, I have heard. Absolutely. Moosey Peoples weighing in. Roll Tide Roll. Hashtag Bama Nation. Thank you guys for watching the show so far. Let me move on to my next one, because I don't think these next three are ones that really pop up on a lot of people's radar, but I went out west because, listen, I made the trip, and I mentioned this to you guys yesterday. I made the trip in a car, in a van, in a minivan with a couple of my old teammates and one of our buddies out to Phoenix a couple of years ago for the national title game. Did I have fun? Absolutely. And what was fun about it? Arizona State and Tempe. What a town. If any of you guys have ever been out to that area, if you've enjoyed Scottsdale, if you've enjoyed Glendale, if you've enjoyed Phoenix, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You can look at the area in the background there as far as that stadium goes. Excellent place to play. It's one of those Pac-12 teams that Bama never gets to square up against. I think that would be a lot of fun to see those teams kind of square off. Really different identities as far as programs go. Now, the next one on my list is somebody that I would like to see the spread against. It would probably be 40 points. That's the UNLV Running Rebels. I think this is such an interesting one to me, too, because if I went out there to Vegas, some of this has popped up in the last couple of days about the SEC tie-ins to a possible Vegas Bowl. I would like to see what the spread was. I think the spread would probably be something like 40 points. How many of you are going to bet the over or bet Bama in the spread to see if Bama can pull that one off? I think that would be an absolute ton of fun. And the last one on my list is one I can't look past. Mario Cristobal, the former Bama assistant, the former Bama offensive line coach up at Oregon. Well, you're talking about Autzen Stadium. You're talking about two different styles of program. You're talking about Oregon, who wears 12 different uniforms a year to Alabama, who wears 2 and who never changes their uniform and does things a lot differently up there. I think the contrasting styles in that one make that a great one to put at number 10 on my list. As far as those games goes, I don't think you can go wrong with any of those 10. So appreciate you guys paying attention to those. You guys are continuing to weigh in on the list. Brian Canterbury says, my fiance is an Army cheerleader. Would love to see Alabama versus Army. Well, I think that'd be a pretty good game too. I definitely can't deny that. I think that would be an interesting to look at Bama going against the triple option. I don't know that Nick Saban will ever schedule a triple option game. I don't think he wants to. I don't think he wants to risk the injury, but obviously very proud of all our guys at the Army and Navy games and doing all those things. Victoria Lynn Burdnick weighing in, kind of agreeing with Brian, saying an Army or Navy game would be nice to see. Christopher McLeod saying Mike Leach versus Saban would be a classic. Shannon Burgess weighing in, our LSU guy. You, sir, are definitely a Vegas fan, Mike. Haha, 2 days in a row. I can't deny it. One of my good buddies graduated from UNLV and was able to play football there, Joe Hawley, who I played with here in Atlanta. Now, I can't let you guys go. It's Wednesday, and you know that it's time for the Scott Cochran kind of pump up video of the week. Now, Scott Cochran has a text message chain. He sends out these videos. Now, these go to current players. These go to former players. They go to some members of the media, and I want to be able to share with you every week what Scott Cochran is kind of putting out. Got a little snippet from this guy that calls himself the hip-hop preacher. If any of you guys have ever seen this guy's videos, he is very intense, kind of fits along the same lines of what Scott Cochran kind of portrays to his players. We got the Scott Cochran video of the week. This is the hip-hop preacher. Hope you guys enjoyed this little snippet.
Intentional delivery. See, this is what I don't do. I don't hang with people who can only get up when they got something to motivate them. That's not somebody I want to hang out with. I want to hang out with the dude in Boston, you can kill him. In Detroit, you can kill him. In Toronto, you can bring the noise. Are you hearing what I'm telling you? I want to hang with somebody. I don't care what the circumstances. I don't care what the situation. You put it on your back and you like, let's go. I don't run with people who count on me to put up 50 points. I run with people who put up 50 on their own. I put up 50, they put up, and we murder you.
I hope you guys enjoyed that little snippet from Scott Cochran. Boy, whenever he sends me the video, it makes me want to run through the wall. I used to enjoy seeing some of the stuff that he would do to, to get his teams kind of ready to play or really ready to attack the day of the week. This is, they're going through summer conditioning right now. Christian McLeod weighing back in on the YouTube comment section. No triple option team. Remember Georgia Southern. That was, the crap through a 10-horn game. A lot of people remember Nick Saban kind of going off about that. Ryan Wright weighing in on the Facebook comment section. Alabama versus Syracuse or Miami. Now, Syracuse would be an interesting game. Team with a lot of history, and of course Miami weighted on my list as well. A couple of Big East teams there when you talk about Syracuse and Miami. So thank you guys for watching the show today. As always, we will be back tomorrow for our final show of the week. We got a lot of good stuff to bring you guys. Enjoyed the conversation today about the opponents. Enjoyed the conversation today about Jonah Williams and a lot of different people that see him going, first round draft pick next year to the NFL. Hope you guys will continue to comment. Hope you guys will continue to share the show. I enjoy this 30 minutes of the day. I hope it's the best 30 minutes of you guys' day as well. So I will see you back here tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern time. For those of you that enjoy SEC Country Live, we will be on today with Brandon Adams at 3 o'clock Eastern time. We'll be back for that show. But until then, hope you guys have a good day and roll Tide.
You've been watching Roll Tide Daily, the new daily program for Crimson Tide fans, presented by SEC Country.